I'm so thrilled I got a fellowship. I'm just like helping with happiness. Yeah,
That's all right.
that'll be great. That's that was hard. It was because it was hard to get in. Actually. Really hard to get in.
Life is very competitive.
Yeah, it is. It's hugely coveted. So for over 2 years, you're about 6 months. So I'm doing 2 3 month periods. But I like that because then I'll know 2 different cohorts and 2 different groups of people. But also they were in a series of renovations, so it's really it's much better than it was. Yeah, so it's in a better way. Actually, I think it's a little bit more.
Yeah, as I was telling you, like the first and last time I went was in like 2000. So
She's at KU, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and what it was like then.
Well, it was already quite impressive, but it was very fortunate there because it was kind of new, so everyone was science, and I could not into this pathway is kind of like place. It's not exceptionally interesting. So
It's getting better.
and I was there. So I was there actually in 1999.
Yeah.
I was there with a friend.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, and I had this
Oh, I know.
They're definitely anarchists. Like they're total anarchists. It takes 2 to 3 weeks for an email to be returned. Like they emails, like they're allergic to emails. All anarchists are allergic to
But
emails.
this goes to my mind, some new
Yeah.
Is that KU?
There's a, yeah,
No,
well, it's near, yeah,
No, last week.
it's near Mannheim. I remember
in Berlin?
No, Mannheim,
I think we're talking about places. I think we're talking about different places.
Oh, no, they're
No.
Oh,
like that's it,
No, no, not the Center V. I don't know the Center for Urbanistic Studies. Other places, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, that's a whole week. That's in, it's a park. I'm extremely excited. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You were talking about the great media. Really just.
Were
you working with that?
It's so.
Really? I've never heard you say there's something wrong with the bear that the bear can fight you. Are you okay?
What?
I've never heard you say anything to me.
Oh, yeah.
You're a virgin force of nature.
I'm working.
Are you doing the UST 15, which is
I
really
don't
good
know,
to
like,
yeah, because the campus is so big.
I'm just asking everybody, so should I wait for other people, or should I start, should we start now?
I think the weather's so miserable to start now.
So I don't know, like, are you coming
Yes, I've seen you both.
from a class, or are you, no, you're coming on your own?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Oh,
fine.
start from the additional media program.
Yeah, from the digital media from, okay, that's amazing, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that you were.
No, I was kind of wondering how the people would come, because last time we had a whole class coming in.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Well,
Joy,
Well, do they know the T, the T?
yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Do the U of T 15?
Well, yeah, and I was thinking about like starting like not too
Yeah,
late,
just start at
like
quarter to.
5:37, so I can run late for 30 minutes.
I think that's a good idea.
So,
Yeah, it's just that people are running from place to place. You know?
yeah, and also like it's kind of.
Yeah, it's miserable.
Yeah. I just want to.
I have an idea.
Oh, yeah, let's record it.
I don't.
Very quick one more.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, this is not.
Yeah, but it's gonna be, no, they can, they see like a bunch of people, but they can't.
I was about to say something.
Yeah, that's
Just security, that's it.
I have a question.
And then I bought the.
Are there some,
She was.
vegan ones?
Oh, this is.
We need something.
This.
Because not every time there's.
Yeah, I think there's.
Yeah.
I know that, that's my favorite are the chives and oats, but there's others which are not the things. So I don't know if it's-
What do we do some research?
Yeah, I only have this.
We just call it. I think they're pretty nice.
We can check them out, we can walk in and check them out.
Yeah.
They don't have some.
I know, because there's been a few sales.
But I think they usually have some.
I think it'd be totally fine, because they have, potato, chives, pancakes, and all sorts of beautiful things, and seaweed salads. I think it'd be good. It's a nice place, because you get, you can get, beautiful like green beans, really nice green beans, it's great. And it's nice, the nice thing is it's long. They're custom to two people at the table, so everyone can probably get started.
Yeah, they usually start more insignificant, more friendly. There's also other vegan places around there.
No, I was there 2 years ago. She tells me, well, I did.
No, that's not what you want. Sure that I'm part. So we can actually start.
So weird to see myself in that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Hello, hello, hello. And I like, hello, hello.
I just trying to figure out how your hair does different hairstyles every 3 months. Like, is it, does your hair like sort of every 3 months it sort of says it's time for a new style, and then it just grows
No,
naturally
it's
into
just
style?
my hair that's
Does it
wakes
grow
up
quickly?
with a different hairstyle.
Oh yeah, God, right, okay. So jealous.
I'm a little bit different, like, I think that my students are having fun in my hair because they always make comments about, like, I'm always very disheveled. I arrive in class, I'm like.
Well, that's the transit system.
Those are my digital students.
Yeah. But that's a fabulous haircut. I have to say that that's just a masterpiece. It reminds me of the Shea Drug from the 1970s.
I am, it's not bad. It's not bad. Okay.
Okay, let's begin.
So I'm all alone. So I should, you should wear this. I can like, okay, so this. Oh my God. So this in theory should go, yeah, in your pocket. And then you just have to turn it on.
No, it's on. It's on.
Is
She
it
told
on?
me that everything
Is
was
it on?
Yeah.
Try.
Hola.
Hola. Hola. And this. Oh, it's already on.
Okay.
Okay. Camera.
If I put it there, is it good?
Do you?
No.
Okay, let's try. Try.
Now? Now? Hola? No.
No, I think you need to put it on the other side. If you, no, like the other side, maybe? This way. No, maybe this way. Because in theory it should. Oh. You're gonna hold it.
Hola. Hola. Okay.
Yeah, now you can.
Yeah?
try.
No, but it's not. Do you hear me?
Can people shut up for a second so that she can try?
Can you hear me now if I talk like this?
Yeah, I think you should move it slightly closer to face. If you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's the proximity to your mouth. So, you just
Yeah,
move
on that side.
Yeah, that would
maybe.
be much better.
That's better? Yeah? Okay.
Okay, so that's good. I project a lot, so I don't even need this, but we need to record it. So, and I'm gonna do a little bit of housekeeping as usual.
So for those people at home, so this is being recorded and it will be online probably next week for people to check out. Welcome to today's Art Sci Salon. We're here with Daniela Brill Estrada, who was here since Sunday. Yeah. And together we did a bunch of things. But before we do this, I wanted to do a little bit of a land acknowledgement, and I want to acknowledge the sacred land on which the University of Toronto operates. Of course, it has been the site of human activities for over 15,000 years, and we remember the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississauga of the Credit, and the Seneca. They've been sharing the land for as long as we remember, and they've been the defenders and the people who took care of this territory for the longest time. And we should be grateful and happy that this has happened. Another thing that is important to remember is the territory was subject to, Elaine is here. Make space for her, please. Okay. So the territory was the subject of the dish with one spoon well covenant, which basically stipulated the sharing of this dish and the sharing of the land, which is a concept that in the West we hardly understand because private property is like golden. So this is something that we should start considering again as we go into a not too bright future. There, I had to say it. Okay, so we're meeting here on Turtle Island, and Daniela Brill Estrada is coming to us from Vienna, but she is originally from Colombia, and so like she's much closer. Like I don't know if it is it closer? No,
Yeah,
it is closer.
yeah.
It is closer. So, or at least I feel closer to her. She's still from the same kind of
Piece of land.
Right? So, and I don't know if I should, like, I don't know how to introduce you, but like you've done so many things. Like I met her during a fan meeting online. It was the pandemic, and so we did as well. And now, and she's done a lot of things, including she did a residency in Buffalo, which is where I met her in person. At Coalesce, and then she is also a fellow at the SETI Institute, and she's doing a PhD in between the University of Vienna and
The Johannes Kepler University.
the Johannes Kepler University. So and many other things, which if you want, you can add to. Her full bio is available on our website, and it will be available also on YouTube when we upload the text. Another thing that I should be saying is I will upload soon some images from the exhibition that she was in at the Brampton Civic Hospital. We went there on Monday, and I don't know if the recordings will be available, but we had a wonderful conversation about the relationship between art and science. There were over 100 people online, and we had a very warm welcome from the people there. We were basically in the atrium of the hospital, and the exhibition actually has a very lovely installations, including our installation. I don't know if you're going to show anything
A
of it.
couple of
Yeah.
pictures. Yeah.
But we also had some of our very own members, such as, for example, Ron Wild had a piece there. Kamaldeep Randhawa had a piece there. And we also had pieces from people from OCAD University on end of life care, and from TMU. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Daniela, and she'll take from here.
Okay, I know that we have to
We
open.
need to, no, okay, we need to share on Zoom. No, the other one.
Okay,
Go here, share, yeah. And it should be, yeah, Adobe, and
Okay.
then share.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
And, okay, good. Do you need me to turn this down, to turn the light down?
Yeah, so we can see it better.
Okay.
Oh, that's much better.
Or should I turn this off completely?
Okay. I mean, this way I don't see you so much, but if you have any questions, you can also interrupt me in the middle of the conversation. I don't mind. And so we can also talk about the things that I'm going to present to you. So the presentation today is called Shapeshifting Matter for an Unstable Universe, which is kind of like the overall title that I gave my research, my artistic research in the last 10 years, maybe. So I brought it all under this title, and I want to tell you a little bit of how I got there and what it means for me and why I talk about it this way. So this vibrates, okay. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of shapeshifting and what does it mean to shapeshift and what is actually shapeshifting matter and why is it important for me to call it shapeshifting. So maybe the ones who saw me in Buffalo are going to recognize some slides because but you can. Okay, that's good. So shapeshifting matter for me.
We need higher volume.
What do you mean in this one?
Yeah, we need a higher.
Okay.
I'll put it back.
Maybe I can just use yours.
You can also try.
Hola.
Nina.
Hello. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's see. Better? And I don't know how to speak.
You
So
can also put like all the if you want. I mean, whatever.
is that better? No. Okay.
A little bit.
I can also use this one if you prefer.
I mean, if you want to use that one, you can modulate it.
Yeah, because I don't.
Yeah, you can hold it.
Yeah, I mean. Hola. Better? Maybe if I close the shirt, it will be closer to my. Yeah. Okay. Like that? Can you hear me better? Okay. So I'm okay. That's good. So I've been researching matter in its most from very different perspectives and from different scales. So my research started actually in physics, in particle physics, into how matter in that scale mutates from one thing to the other. So I did my master thesis at CERN, and I was researching how certain particles could be the reason why certain molecules are bound. But all of this from an artistic perspective. So for me, shapeshifting matter is the material of which the universe is made of, and the material that we know of, because 95% of matter, we don't know what it is. We call it dark matter, but we really don't know what it is. So the shapeshifting matter includes also that. It's like the matter that the universe is made of and how it shapeshifts and makes the different bodies that we know of. So I try to understand bodies as temporal stabilizations of this matter, and but not only temporal, but also spatial and also local. So matter stabilizes in different bodies in a temporal moment of time, but also in space and also locally. So it only exists through the connection of these different like scales or environments or surroundings where it is. And I'm now beginning to propose a sort of theory of how the way that matter combines in these different spaces, like in space and time and locality and so on, depending on how complex the connection of of matter is, then a material is considered, for example, alive. So my artistic work is based mainly on the binary between living matter and non-living matter, because I think that once I erase that boundary between something that we consider alive and not alive, I can erase a lot of other binaries and taxonomies and categories that we use to try to understand matter. So this is the matter that we know of the universe. So I got a little bit obsessed for a while with the origin of the chemical elements, because in this speculation of how bodies are built and how matter is built and so on, I had to go back to the origin of chemical materials and chemical elements. So in this periodic table made by Jennifer Johnson, she was researching the cosmic origin of every chemical element. So the chemical elements that we know of are created when different stars in the cosmos die. When they collide, or when they explode, or when they implode, or when they like different types of stars collide with each other and so on. So I was researching all of them. I tried to gather all of the chemical elements and understand the connection with their cosmic origin to the material bodies that they bind on Earth, because I'm talking about the locality also of the matter. And this would be the cosmic origin of the human body. So if I take the chemical elements that bind the human body, and I divide it into its chemical properties and the cosmic origin of each chemical property, this is what you're actually made of. So 10% of your body is hydrogen, so it was probably made during Big Bang fusion. And 18% of the body is carbon, so it's when a low mass star dies, carbon atoms are created or generated in the cosmos, and so on. This is the amount of the chemical elements in the human body, and I was researching, and I am still very much focused on the element of carbon, because the element of carbon is the only chemical element capable of binding complex molecules on Earth that we know of. So there's this whole scientific path and research into how silicon can also be a molecule that binds an atom that binds complex molecules. But as far as we know, life is only possible because of carbon. So carbon is an atom that has enough arms to build complex structures that are that are the reason why living molecules exist. So I based my artistic research on carbon, and I'm still basing it mainly on carbon because of this reason, because I'm interested in the difference between what we consider to be alive and what we consider to not be alive. This is a piece that I did in Vienna a couple of years ago. This is part of the piece where I was asking myself, okay, if I'm trying to understand myself as this matter that is constantly shape-shifting and transforming, and not as a stable body of a human, animal, woman, but as a trajectory of matter, then I did like these statements. One of them was, a living body is a temporal trajectory of information, which is basically what I just told you. And the other one is what I am. So I wrote, I am a nonlinear, indeterminate, symbiotic, collaborative, random information process. And this is all going to be explained further in my presentation. So these drawings were actually made with graphite, with pure graphite, which is exactly the same carbon that binds our DNA. So carbon has allotropes, which is like basically the same chemical structure. And one of them is our carbon in our bodies, and another one is the graphite in your pencils, and the other one is diamonds, and it is exactly the same carbon. So when I was telling you at the beginning that I was researching this possible force or this possible reason why one atom would bind life and one atom would bind a piece of graphite rock, this is what I meant. So it is exactly the same chemical element, one binding life and one binding these drawings. This is where I grew up in Colombia. So this is the picture on the left is actually what you would see in the town where I grew up, which is called Chía. It's north from Bogota, like an hour north. And the two pictures on the right is a little bit further down the mountain, and it's the house of one of my best friends, and it's a coffee finca. So when I say that the bodies are also locally like shape-shifting matter that is found locally or that grows locally, I also mean that the atoms of carbon that bind my DNA are not only coming from the cosmos and from the stars, but are coming from this rock that we are standing on. So I'm really interested in how the trajectories of these materials also come from the geological and biological environment where the body exists or where the matter exists. These are just veggies and fruits that grow where I grew up, because this is also a part of it. So the next slide, yeah. So this is a book by Nick Lane called The Vital Question. And he was the first researcher that I read talking about how a geochemical cycle becomes a biochemical cycle on Earth. So about this jump of geochemistry into biochemistry. And he says, geochemistry gives rise seamlessly to biochemistry. From this point of view, the fact that we can't distinguish between geology and biology in these old rocks is fitting. Here is a living planet giving rise to life, and the two can't be separated without splitting a continuum. This is the carbon atom I was telling you about. So the same carbon atom that is part of those beans and of those kales and pineapples is the carbon atom that comes from the cosmos, and it is the same carbon atom that is in my pencil and in a diamond. And I'm a bit obsessed of how we can go beyond the fact that it is exactly the same chemical element. And I started, if I ask myself the question, what is the difference between living materials and non-living materials? I had to ask myself the question, what is life? How are we actually defining life? And what do we mean when we say life? And how do we study life without making it like a hierarchical endeavor in science? This is the first Google result that I got when I Googled life, the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual change preceding death. The existence of an individual human being or animal. So for me, that was not enough. It was not from this answer, I started collecting a lot of different definitions of life and who was defining it. So the physicists have one definition for life, the chemists have another one, the philosophers have another one, the religions have another one, and so on. This is a quote by Sarah Walker, who is my favorite scientist in the whole world. And she says, "We are not attempting to define life. You and I have already seen how such attempts fail. Instead, our aim is to provide a formalism for unifying life and the inanimate. How can we uncover the physics that gives rise to life and allows the transition from non-life to even happen?" Sarah Walker just published her first book. She's a biophysicist at the University of Arizona, and she published a beautiful book in August 24 that I read immediately, called Life as No One Knows It. And what Sarah Walker is trying to do is trying to find a scientific theory, a mathematical way of defining life. So she wants to take a material, whatever the material is, and put it into this, let's say, machine that gives you a number. And if the number is high enough, the material is alive. If the number is low, then the material is not alive, which is kind of crazy for me. But from the perspective of physics, this is the most artistic one that I have found. So I think what Sarah does, although she is a biophysicist full-time and researches biophysics and alien life research, I think she's also doing very much artistic work and aesthetic work. And I'm gonna go into that too a little bit. So I collect ammonites, which is the fossils of these little snail-like creatures, but they are stones. And I ask myself, okay, when did this stop being alive? And when is it going to be alive again? Because if it is then part of the ocean and part of the cycle, it can be like it can become part of a living body again. I have to talk about her because I think human history has tried to erase a lot of women in science that have done a lot of amazing things for science. And one of them is Mary Anning. Mary Anning was, for me, the most important paleontologist, I think, in history. She was from the UK and she was researching ammonites. There's a beautiful movie by her, if you're not into, about her, sorry, which I think is it's a beautiful representation of her life. Yeah, just side note, Mary Anning. This is Paul B. Preciado talking about politics and dangers of taxonomizing matter. And Paul says, I don't know if you have read Paul Preciado, and this book is called An Apartment on Uranus. And it is a book full of short texts written by Paul for a magazine, for a newspaper. So it's pretty much a political book about the trans experience, and it is a political book about gender. And Paul is saying that there is a violence generated by the dualist epistemology of the West. The entire universe cut in half and solely in half. Everything is heads or tails in this system of knowledge. We are human or animal, man or woman, living or dead. We are the colonizer or the colonized, living organism or machine. We have been divided by the norm. And I I work a lot with the theory of Paul Preciado because I think that these words come really close to the dangers of taxonomizing life. So when humans take life on Earth and start categorizing it, not only in this is alive and this is not alive, which means I can explode this a lot, and this I have to taxonomize to be able to explode. Explode, no. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, the Earth. Yeah, I'm missing some words translated from Spanish. Exploit. That's the word. Thank you. Yes. So there is a big danger in these taxonomizations and categorizations. So when you are categorizing the minerals on Earth as alive or not alive, you are giving yourself permission to exploit, for example, the metals in the Earth. So you are giving yourself permission to exploit gold and to mine coltan and to mine copper. And we don't recognize that these elements are a part of the living system of the Earth. So they are part of this shape-shifting matter of this living planet. And I always like to say this example because I think it really brings it to the point. I'm from Colombia, and in Colombia we have this very big problem with gold mining, and a lot of communities around the Amazon are being polluted with mercury because of the gold mining. And I talked to people who are in favor of the mining, and I always ask myself, like, okay, maybe I can tell them, I'm going to, if you are saying the gold is not a living part of the system because it's a metal, then I could say, I'm going to mine out of your blood the iron, just the iron. I'm going to take the iron atoms out of your body, nothing else. The rest of your body is going to stay the same. I'm not going to touch anything but the iron. I just need the iron from your body. Then they would maybe realize that the metals in the Earth have a reason to be there, and that they are part of this very living cycle of shapeshifters that the Earth is. I'm sorry this quote is in Spanish, but this is by my close friend and favorite complexologist, as he calls himself, Carlos Maldonado, and I'm going to translate it. He says, the history of the West is the history of the negation of the senses, the division of disciplines, the hierarchization of knowledge, the determinism, reductionism, dualism, and mechanicism. So he gave us a whole class. It's in Spanish, but it's kind of a master class on complexity sciences. And he was doing it comparing complexity sciences and aesthetics. So he took us back to the Greek, and he told us exactly when was the time when the Greek decided to divide the world and to categorize it into different disciplines, into different states of matter, into this is alive and this is not. This is a poet, so they have to go from the how is it so he threw from the Republic. So Plato threw the poets out of the Republic because they were way too dreamy to talk about politics. So he categorized, these are the artists out, these are the scientists and the mathematicians in, and they are allowed into the Republic. So before that, it was the same people. So I really like this approach from Carlos into this Westerns, because it is a recent history. It is a recent statement to say that gold is not alive. And we have adopted it as natural, but it is pretty recent. I mean, it's like 4,000 or 5,000 years. Before that, the person who was doing medicine was also the poet and knew that the elements were part of the living system. And he also, because I said this about the artist, and Carlos told me this, like got to the point by telling me, about the word aesthetics, because aesthetics comes from the word aesthesis, and the contra word to aesthesis is anesthesia. So it is either you feel the world and you perceive the world, and that's aesthetics, which was thrown out of the Republic, or you are anesthetized, which was what they finally did. And that's where I'm going now with this. We were talking before about the anarchists, and this is my all-time favorite anarchist saying, and I repeat it in every one of my presentations because I think this should be said, especially in Western academic context. Too much order is a sign of danger. Run, run. If a city is too organized, run. If a person is too organized, there's a danger. In, you know, like politicians, if something sounds or looks too organized, there's no life. Life needs complexity and freedom and a bit of disorganization. And the way we have researched life and the way we have categorized life is through taxonomies. This is a very short introduction into the history of taxonomies. There's this beautiful book that I brought actually to show Roberta by Carol Kaesuk Yoon called Naming Nature, the Fight Between Instinct and Science. And it's my favorite book about taxonomies and the history of taxonomies. So Carol says that it started with folk taxonomies and innate categorizations, which is the ones humans naturally have when they are born. So we are born and we have this natural system in our brain that tells us that's an animal, that's a table, that's a fish, that's a tree. So these things are natural to animals. And it is called the Umwelt. That's the German word for environment. But I like it in German more because it means literally like is like around and Welt is world. So it's like the world around the body. And then came the precious Greeks that I was telling about. So Aristoteles, who was categorizing not only artists and scientists and politicians, he also came up with the first categorization of animals based on shared characteristics. So one of the ones I like is this one with these animals had blood and these animals don't have blood. And that was the categories. Then the Linnean revolution that you might have heard of, because this was the first time that life was classified hierarchically, but it was still very intuitive. It was still very visual. It was still based on like visual similar characteristics of fish or of trees or of whatever, but it did create a hierarchy. Then Darwin revolutionized everything because I don't know how to, if I can put this away.
Actually drag it from here.
So you can see the whole.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you can drag it somewhere up.
Oh.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah.
But this is still there. Okay, okay, okay. I don't know how to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now you see what I
Oh,
wrote.
it's gone.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it like this.
Just leave
Mhm.
it there.
Yeah.
It's now gonna show in the recording, but
Okay. But now I cannot go back. Okay, so Darwin. Darwin, who is a person I really like. I'm actually not so critical towards Darwin as to the rest of them, because I think Darwin was kind of misunderstood. So Darwin realized that there was a deeper connection than just the superficial connections that we see based on evolutionary relationships. And I think that is beautiful because that brought chaos into it, because it said, oh, this fish is closer related to the cow than to this other fish. And that brought a little bit of chaos. But the next step was to try to organize that chaos. It was the cladists and phylogenetics. So they needed proof, they needed evidence of these facts. So they started rejecting everything that was superficial. So if two flowers were red and we thought they were the same species or the same kind of flowers, they said like, no, even if both are red, I need some proof. Which meant that people that were previously doing their own taxonomies, because at this point, she explains it in the book much better than I'm explaining it right now, but she explains, for example, during the time of the colonies, people were categorizing everything that they didn't understand and they didn't know, because Europe was in a bubble and then they discovered this whole other place and animals and fruits and everything, and then they tried to categorize it, but it was everything that they had done in thousands of years. This happened in a dozen of years, so they had to do it very fast. So people were actually taking the things home, and people, normal people like you and me, would say like, oh, I brought these flowers from Colombia and these flowers from Mexico, and I see that there is a connection. And they could write a paper to the academia, and the academia would take it in, would take that as actual knowledge. And what the clarists did was say, no, normal humans can no longer have a saying in taxonomies. We need proof and we need scientific proof. So then the molecular revolution and the DNA, the discovery of the DNA took place, which was another amazing step for me, like this chaos coming in, like previously Darwin had. But they could have used DNA to disorganize it and to make it a little bit less dangerous. And they closed it so much that they made it even more closed and non-understandable for other people who were outside of the laboratories. Then she talks about this moment of science versus instinct, which is the moment where science takes the whole idea of taxonomies and closes it for themselves. So nature is only recognized in a laboratory in a white coat and no longer outside. So she says, for example, that nowadays we go to the forest and we need a biologist to tell us what mushroom we can eat without dying. This wasn't like this 200 years ago. We knew what mushroom to eat. Now we don't. We don't need a physicist to go and play basketball, but we need a biologist to go and eat mushrooms. So she's saying like we are so far, like we have been so separated from life and from living organisms and from nature that we need the laboratory to tell us what's alive and what's not alive. This is practically the same, but in two short writings in my notebook, because I thought like this shows a little bit of like how hierarchical the whole system was. Like saying that it's a kingdom, for example, the names alone are hierarchical and the names alone are oppressive. Saying kingdom, class, order, family, all of these names are also very, very like, yeah, maybe we could look for other things to understand life. I don't know. This is by her book. So many people are now so blind to the living world that there are increasing numbers who see no point in wasting time or money on the study of its ordering, from university presidents to government administrators to the heads of federal funding agencies. In museums and universities, the post of taxonomist, the only scientist whose focus is the ordering and naming of living things, is being eliminated. Meanwhile, universities across the globe are abandoning their zoological and botanical collections, getting rid of the actual organisms. The awful results of that taxonomists, the men and women who order and name life, are a dwindling, dying breed. Casting aside the Umwelt is costing us all. This is a picture I took at the National History Museum in Nottingham a while ago. And why would we bother? It wasn't supposed to work this way. A deeper scientific knowledge of life was supposed to enhance our understanding of the living world, not undermine it. It was supposed to bring science and common knowledge together into harmony. Darwin predicted on the Origin of Species that as we better understand the evolutionary ordering of life, scientific and common language will come into accordance. Yet the progress of science has not led to an accordance of languages or a better mutual understanding. True scientific ordering often stands instead in direct opposition to our instinctual view of the natural order of the living world. It tells us that our view of life is in fact wrong. Simply by asserting its own correctness, science has come to stand directly in our way, intervening whenever we might stray. All of us, too confident in the rightness of science, have allowed this. This is a picture I took while in a residency in Austria at the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria. This is the house where they keep the rat and the mice for experimenting. They have over 37,000 animals in this building, and the building is completely closed. So the animals never breathe the air, never see the sunlight, never experience communications with other, even from their own species. They are alone in cages. And when they need to be transported, they have their own tunnels inside of the whole institute. So they never go out, they never breathe, they never, nothing. And I ask myself, if it is possible to understand life by taking its complexity away and by putting it in cages. What I find interesting is that even though humans think they are like on this top of the hierarchy of living animals, the reason why we use mice in laboratories is because we are so extremely close to them genetically. And that's beautiful for me. We are so close to them, that we use them to experiment on things that humans are going to need. I wrote a text for a performance that I have in Vienna soon, and this is part of it. I'm gonna, yeah. So this is a very personal text, but I wanted to share a bit with you. When humans found genetics, they thought they had found the tool finally to taxonomize the world correctly, mathematically. But genetics only showed even more how chaotic and complex and intaxonomizable life is. They found that the lungfish is genetically closer to a cow than to a salmon, and that human animals share about 60% of their genes with potatoes and over 40% with carrots. Impossible, senseless, but true. Genetics was at the same time the perfect tool to intaxonomize the world and a tool to further divide and conquer. Guess which one the taxonomizers chose? Over 90% of the universe shapeshifts and hides from humans. Of the many candidates for dark energy, that intaxonomizable force that keeps expanding the universe, my favorite ones are called chameleon particles. And they are called like this because they shapeshift so perfectly well. Not even the most modern technologies are able to capture them. Shapeshifters and intaxonomizables are the majority of the world, and they are the reason why the universe expands, and they know how to hide. So here I started a whole artistic project on something I call the intaxonomizables that I started because every time I have an exhibition like the one I told you about at the beginning, where I said, I am a trajectory of information, or every time I'm gonna show you a piece where I consider myself as a geological formation inside of a mountain, every time I do this, normally a white man in the exhibition tries to either tell me that I'm wrong or mansplain me why I'm not wrong, or actually actively, aggressively goes against my piece and takes it down. So I started the research on intaxonomizables to tell my story and who I am and how I consider myself an intaxonomizable trajectory of these chemical elements I was telling you at the beginning about. This is just pictures of lungfish because I love them so very much, And I think everybody should know how they look like. They are super close to cows because they breathe. I mean, they're amazing. I can just recommend you to look into lungfish. Yeah. I don't know if any of you got to go to the Biennale this year, but there were some amazing. Yeah. So these are different artists, all from the global south. This is, I'm sorry, you don't see her name. Yeah, I'm sorry. So this Sandra is was at the Spanish pavilion talking about, these are all plants that were brought from the Americas to Europe, and the faces are of people who have been killed because they were protecting the land. And the other one, Abel Rodriguez, is an artist from the Amazonas, from the Colombian side of the Amazonas, and he produced his own ways of perceiving the trees and categorizing them so they would, for example, not eat the wrong fruits. So there are non-Western takes on taxonomies from the arts. So these are all artists, which I think is really beautiful. Lulu Miller wrote my all-time favorite book. I know I say that a lot, but the book is called Why Fish Don't Exist. And she says, this was what Darwin was trying so hard to get his readers to see, that there is never just one way of ranking nature's organisms. To get stuck on a single hierarchy is to miss the bigger picture, the messy truth of nature, the whole machinery of life. The work of good science is to try to peer beyond the convenient lines we draw over nature, to peer beyond intuition where something wilder lives, to know that in every organism at which you gaze, there is a complexity you will never comprehend. And I think art is a tool to disorganize the studies of nature and to understand nature in a different way. This is a picture of the Serranía de la Lindosa in the Guaviare region of Colombia. It was discovered a few years ago after the peace agreement with the FARC. So Colombia was in this never-ending war with the guerrillas, with the FARC guerrillas. And a few years ago, they did a peace agreement. And the FARC, the guerrillas, they were in a piece of the, of the Amazonian, how do you say selva forest, jungle in Colombia. And these are drawings on the stone made 7,500 years ago, but they have found more older ones. Until 22,000 years ago, they found drawings. So Carol from the book says, humanity's earliest recorded thoughts are a literal zoo and garden of notes from the Umwelt. So for me, we learn this in art. When we study art, we learn about this, wrongly called like cave paintings or whatever, like prehistoric, blah, blah, blah. This is actually scientific research for me. They were understanding nature through their senses aesthetically and using the tools that they had, the technologies that they had, which was pigments and the walls, to understand it and to research it and to understand the cycles and the materials and the way the water was flowing and the moon and so on. And this is still going on. This is also at the Biennale. Wilson Rodriguez, also from the Amazon, doing a calendar from an artistic perspective, from his own point of view, which was beautiful. This is a piece done in 2023. So this means that people are still researching nature through their bodies and aesthetically. And it is only us in the Western academia who think that nature only exists in these like closed scientific spaces. This is also by Lulu Miller. To let go of that hierarchy would be to release a tornado of life, beetles and hawks and bacteria and sharks swirling high into the air all around him, above him. It would have been too disorienting. It would have been chaos. She's talking, when she says him, she's talking about David Jordan Starr, who was the guy who tried to taxonomize fish, which was an impossible task because fish are too complex to be taxonomized. And he was also a murderer. She tells the story about him murdering the founder, the woman who founded Stanford, I think, and how he denies the complexity of fish when he finds it. And I always use this picture of the Chihuahuas running wild to explain how I view chaos, because I talk a lot about chaos, like mathematical chaos, but this is actually a good example, because Chihuahuas are probably the dogs that we can say, like, we know how this system works. So it is predictable. It is a predictable living system. We get a Chihuahua, we know how they're gonna live and how they're gonna behave. Well, this pack of Chihuahuas, they are running wild in the streets, I think of LA, no, Miami or something like, I think it's Miami. And they were free finally. So they were able to live how they are supposed, like chaotically, and they needed, so this being a predictable state, a predictable system, got derailed and was no longer predictable. So from the point A to the point B, which should be a predictable trajectory for a Chihuahua, they just went crazy. And that's chaos for me. That's how I can explain it the best way.
They can be very wild.
Yes.
Chihuahua, they can be vicious.
But we know this previously of the system. And this way it was like completely running wild. And I loved it, yeah. Matter that shapeshifts can only temporarily be categorized. I can only temporarily be categorized as a woman in this shape that I have right now. In those temporal stabilizations, some bodies or existences refused to be taxonomized. They are too chaotic for human-made taxonomies. And that's where I go into the intaxonomizables. This is also a painting I saw at the Biennale by Violeta Quispe, one of the most beautiful paintings. This is just a detail, but I can honestly advise you to look into her work. And then on the side, it's me with Spot, which is the robot dog we have at the office at the Johannes Kepler University. So on the side, I also love robots and work with robots. And I think they can also be a chaotic system. This is also part of the text that I read before. And this is how I start to explain what I mean with intaxonomizables. It would be kind of pointless to start this text by defining what the intaxonomizables are. It would be confusing, counterproductive. It would be absurd to try to categorize stuff that is intrinsically chaotic, loving, weird, squishy, complex, indisciplined. And when I say stuff, I mean objects, I mean bodies, I mean friends. I sometimes mean animals that wear flower costumes and sometimes mean flowers made out of plastic. I mean robot dogs, I mean tornadoes, I mean geological formations. I mean the language you use underwater when your humanity won't let you communicate the way you're used to. I mean me. This is a trip into recognizing the pointlessness of constructing cages and drawers for irregular, fractal, metamorphic, perfect bodies that won't fit into them, because I don't fit into any of those categories. I've been told I'm too indisciplined. I've been told I prioritize the wrong stuff. I've been told I love the wrong person. I've been told I love my rocks too much. I spend too much time looking at animals. I get too distracted by dogs. I drink too much coffee. I share too many memes of chickens. I get lost too easily. I've been told I waste my time. I have too many dinosaur toys. I've been told I'm weird. The intaxonomizables are not a group of existences with specific attributes. They are shapeshifters, existing however we do in the second we do. You cannot measure our wings or the time we spend in the cocoon. You cannot describe our environment, our fertility dances, our preferred diet, or the trees we choose to nest. There is no measurement because our surface is chaotic, fractal. The more you try to measure it, the further away from the measurement you get. I don't want to speak for all of us. We're a large number, unstable, constantly changing. I don't know what I'll wake up being tomorrow. That is the only true parameter I follow, uncertainty. I live in a state of imbalance, contradiction, chaos. And as evolution has proved, what doesn't mutate doesn't survive. What doesn't migrate freezes. Life only exists outside of equilibrium. I have understood myself as an intaxonomizable trajectory of information, as a mutation of atoms into molecules, into atoms, into molecules, into atoms, into clouds, into probability, into numbers, into cells, into water, into blood, and so on eternally, as a future fossil, as a dike, a salt dike, a geological formation born under pressure, a rock that perceives like all the rocks by transforming in its own rocky time. This was the piece I was telling you about earlier when I tried to define myself as a salt dike. I love this definition because I play a lot with the word dike, which means at the same time lesbian and this geological formation born out of pressure. This is from Sabrina Imbler, also a beautiful, wonderful, extremely talented scientist. She says, a dike, according to geology, is a sheet of magma born in a fracture. And then she says, dikes indicate that some significant tectonic event took place a long time ago. Either the Earth's crust reached toward each other, creating mountain ranges like interlocked fingers across a table, or the crusts pull apart, thinning to the point of a valley like the sagging blanket between two bodies on either side of a bed. This is a salt dike. So a dike actually is generated when tectonic plates move and the pressure pushes the mineral to break a bigger rock on top of it. And I think I'm closer to a salt dike than to a human. That was my proposal in this piece. I was mansplained a lot that that's not possible. Because how can I talk about dikes if I'm not a dike? This was part of the piece. It was a video piece where I was researching the salt dikes in the mines in Austria, in Salzburg. And this is part of the texts that I use to understand myself as a dike. Salt is highly sensitive to heat and pressure and tends to flow rather than recrystallize. Me too. I flow between the walls. I'm fully me, squishy me, dike me. And Marcia Bjornerud, who is a geoscientist, says that rocks are not nouns but verbs. So she explores rocks as part of the living world, which was how I began this talk. So I was telling Roberta before that I have been obsessed with rocks and minerals for a long time, my whole life. And I see them as part of life. And to categorize them as a living body, I need to perceive them from the perspective of deep time. Like if you look at not the last 100 million years of the Earth, but the last 4.5 billion years, which is the time that the Earth has existed as a body in space, then you see it differently and you see the Earth living and you see the minerals and the metals and the rocks as part of this living system. This is the piece I was showing in Brampton last week, which is a collection of minerals, and I just hang them in little bottles and I write their cosmic origin that I showed you at the beginning, and if they are part of the human body or not. How do we find them on Earth? And this is the piece I did last year in Buffalo, where I was growing crystals, salt crystals, and watching them grow to give them the properties of what we call a living system. So they grow, they breathe, they metabolize, they move, they behave in community, and so on. And this is the last project I'm doing. These are all the possible exoplanets that NASA and the SETI Institute are researching for life, for alien life. And all of these exoplanets are either icy or rocky and have different geologies. And I started my residency at the SETI Institute together with Julie Michel Morat and Bart Kuipers last month. And we are researching how the chemical properties of the exoplanets are the ones that build the bodies on each planet that we are researching. So it's actually the shape-shifting matter of the universe. So I'm no longer only talking about these local planets, but all the possible planets where there is a possibility of life. But this is a collaborative project with 2 other artists. And what we're going to do is actually chemical poetry. So we want to take the chemical elements of each exoplanet and do some poetry with chemistry, because we believe that if you are a body that is made of the same chemical atoms as the planet where you grow, then you must feel the planet's chemistry. That's like the initial thought behind it. And that's what we want to research during our time at the SETI Institute. And that's it. This is the bibliography of my talk.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. Really agree with you. I think we have questions with Grace.
Oh, I think you have to use this for the.
Yeah, we need the mic so that he gets recorded. Not necessarily that like your face won't necessarily be seen, but.
Thank you very much for the inspiring talk. I really loved it. I also am a big fan of Sarah Walker. I've been listening to some of the podcasts that she put out while she was at SFI, and it's like rather interesting to think about just how indefinable this is. And yeah, I agree with you. It's very poetic. 2 quick things. I wondered if you know the work of Christian Bach. You might enjoy his poetries. They're in crystalline formations, and they deal with like the chemistry of different minerals and as well as life and its categorization. So it seems like it might be up your alley. And then there's an early Russian theorist named Vernadsky who kind of gets overlooked, but he had some really interesting thoughts about sort of the living crust surrounding the earth. And this was kind of when people were talking about noosphere and things like that.
Yeah.
To put that in
I think
perspective.
of this name I have probably in one of the Marcia Björnerud books. I think she talks about this, yes. But the first name, it would be beautiful if you can write it down for me. So,
Okay.
or I can write it down because I'm gonna forget
Oh,
from
we'll do
just
that. I'll
this
find you after.
comment.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay. In what sense? Yeah, that was not a question. That was like more of a comment and advice but you have a question. Yeah. Because I have questions, but I'm gonna go after everybody else.
I'm very inspired. So I have a couple of questions. One is around that idea of if things are get too organized, that it could be, a sign of danger. Have you delved into the psychology of humans, I guess we call humans, around the motivation for categorization? So is it fear-based? For example, like we can think of like psychological expressions like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, like wanting everything in order, right?
Yeah.
What do you have any thoughts on that? And then my second one is completely different, but I'm wondering if you've heard of that plant called, I came across it, it's considered a living plant that's also a fossil because it can live up to 2,000 years. The Welwitschia mirabilis, it's found in Namibia deserts, and it only has 2 leaves, and it's both female and male, and the way that it procreates is completely unexplainable. So that's it.
Thank you. So your first question, I have not looked into the psychology of OCD behavior or of too much order. I mean, I think these are all super interesting things to look into. I think I don't like the word disorder because it's a process that's going on in a person's like way of existing, and there's a reason for it to be there. I think. I mean, that would be like kind of my. So this kind of like different organizing, too much order. I need too much order. I have not looked into the psychology of this. I have looked into the psychology of the Umwelt that I was explaining. And for example, there is this whole study on people who have accidents and lose that part of the brain that's why they know the Umwelt exists. That's why they know that we do have an intrinsic categorization system to categorize what's alive and what's not to survive. That's the reason why we have it. So we know that this is an apple and not a rock that we are eating, or that this is the mother and not the table or whatever. So there are people who have accidents and lose that part of the brain, and they cannot recognize life. They recognize everything else, chairs, tables, computer, everything, but they cannot tell you the difference between an apple and a dog. It's super weird, but it happens. So this is the only like thing of organization that I have looked into, it's not psychologically, like physically in the brain. But I think it's really interesting to look at it from this perspective too. I wonder if OCD is something modern, if it's like part of the results of this era or I don't know. I think it's interesting to think about it. And your second question, I think I don't know the plant, but I would the same. I tend to forget it when you tell it to me like this. So if I write it down afterwards, it would be beautiful. Thank you.
Anybody else? I have a question as well. Oh, yeah, Elaine.
Thank you, Daniela. That was absolutely marvelous, really interesting
Thank you.
talk. Your work with salt, I wanted to ask you, did you say you, everyone knows because I work with salt. Did you actually grow it as well? Did you culture it and grow it?
The salt?
As part of an art piece?
Yeah. So the salt the drawings in Buffalo that I exhibited in Buffalo, those were just simple salt drawings. I think I had a picture of them. Oh no, was it this bag? No, I'm sorry. Did you see them?
Yeah.
So those are just like super easy salt drawings that I did with saturated water, and I grow them. And then the first time I did them was actually at Cultivamos Cultura in Portugal with Marta, and I did them at the sea. So I brought my carbon ink and my paper because I use a special calcium carbonate paper because I care a lot for every chemical element in my pieces. So the paper is calcium carbonate and the ink was carbon ink, and I used the water from the sea. And then the crystals grew on the paper. And I looked at them under the microscope, how they were growing and how they were like becoming adults and so on, and all these like different stages. And then I saw how they were breathing at night when the humidity went up and they began to melt and come up again, and melt and come up again. And metabolization is also a part of it. And recently I've been exploring other types of salts, like copper sulfate and yeah.
I was wondering how you were working with it, because as salt is a natural part of the body, it's one of the main minerals of the body, that combination of salt as a mineral but salt as the body always confuses people, and they think of it as organic. They start categorizing it, and it's that it becomes a category of what's organic or what's inorganic, and it is considered inorganic and not organic, but we know that it is part of us as well as part of the earth.
Yeah.
And that I use that confusion in my work as well, to talk about it, that it's not considered organic. It is a mineral, it's lithic, but it is part of us.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. When I was talking about deep time and the salt dike, I actually look at salt breathing and metabolizing in these little crystals. But if you look at salt breathing and metabolizing in the history of the earth, so you have all of these seas and oceans that were evaporating 2 billion years ago. So Europe was a sea, the Sextine Sea, and it started evaporating, and then the salt was left behind. And then you see the salt breathing, and then the salt gets, because of the tectonic movements, the caves built. So you see it as a lung, for example. And you can, if you would watch, how do you say, how are these videos called that you can do like time lapse of the earth, then you would see the salt actually flowing and being a living part of the system. And in the human body, if I understand correctly, maybe you will tell me that it's differently. We use it to, for example, expand and contract the muscles. So we need it to breathe because it's a contraction and expansion of the muscles. So salt is also an essential part of our breathing, of our human breathing. And that's a beautiful connection too.
And it's part of our blood. So that's why electrolytes are always given at a hospital. When you go to a hospital, they're going to infuse you with salt in order to keep you going. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I didn't find the one I was looking for. I'm sorry.
I'm not really sure why, but when I was watching your talk, I was thinking a lot about the Magic Mountain. And there's that incredible situation where they talk that philosophical discussion about what is life, what is death, and the disintegration of life and death and what it means. But I just wanted to throw that into your mix because what's happening is that the organic chemicals are shifting, right?
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to throw that out as something that I found really poignant. But the other thing I found about your talk is actually definition of magic. So I'm teaching game design now, and my students are constantly talking about shapeshifting. And it's really, your talk is about shapeshifting. Their whole world's building exercise is about shapeshifting from organic, inorganic, whatever. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, cool. So this idea also started because when I was a child, I was kind of obsessed with falling asleep in the park and dying. I don't know why I thought I would die in the park, and then what would happen to my different cells? What would happen to the cells of my liver and my heart, and then the bones, and then the hair? And then I thought, but they don't stop being alive. They just change the way they behave, and they change the way they relate to the other molecules around and to the other cells around. That's why I also call shape-shifting like these reconnections or re-relating to the other organisms around.
Yes, I see what you're saying is like a much more granular version of ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But you're saying ashes to ashes, dust to dust, carbon to carbon. So it's like you're taking,
Yes. I'm going. Yes. So lately, when we were at the hospital and we were looking at these pieces that were relating to the end of life, I I think, of course, in this idea that I'm working with, it never ends, because it just shapeshifts into something different. And that's it. If that something has DNA, so if that something would, according to Sarah Walker, be complex enough to be alive, then that something can continue with the trajectory is a complex trajectory. Mm-hmm. Okay.
You might love that. It's all about recursive.
Okay.
Movies loops.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, my turn now. I'm always waiting as the last person to say something. Okay, there is more people? Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand because Suzanne's hair was covering. You're good.
Actually, it was a pretty simple question. It was, how do you experience deep time?
So I think that deep time is something that we are able to experience with our bodies, but we forgot. And with so this is a whole other thing. When I talk about this love that I have for Mary Anning, the researcher that I was talking about the Ammonites, I think that she perceived deep time in the stones that she found. So I showed it to Roberta. I'm always carrying a rock with me. And the rock I'm carrying today by chance is a piece of fossilized wood. So it used to be a tree, which we consider to be alive, and now it's a rock, a fully rock. 150 million later, a tree is a rock, depending on how it falls and the movements and so on. So for example, by contemplating or touching these fossils and these rocks, you can imagine deep time. You can imagine the oxygen running through that little animal, or you can imagine the tree growing in that piece of rock, in that piece of stone. Yeah, in the text that I read, that I wrote myself, I talk a little bit about how Mary Anning was able to feel that, and how this is possibly one of my other big loves is people who were considered witches and were burned because of what they knew, which is exactly this. They had this kind of knowledge. It was not about something more than we know. It is about knowing the Umwelt and recognizing it. And in the Umwelt is the deep time. So I think it is in our bodies that we could perceive it somehow.
I think that's really beautiful. Thanks. I'm gonna keep that with me, but I'm also thinking, in terms of what Elaine started talking about, in this kind of confusion between the inorganic and organic with reference to salt. I was thinking a lot about what Christine Sharp was saying in terms of the resident time of blood and salt in the ocean, and the bodies that were cast off slave ships and their death, and the way that the ocean carries that in its wake, right? Because the resident time of salt in water is like 50 million years or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also interesting, kind of contextualizing for that deep time.
Yeah. History. Yeah, it's really, really beautiful. And about that, there was this theory about finding out the time that the earth has existed by the amount of water in the ocean, which was then kind of officially debunked, that it was not possible to do it. But there is a theory of trying to find out the age of the planet by the amount of salt in the ocean. That's all in the book. I can also give you the name of the people who were proposing that. Yeah.
Okay, so now my turn. While you were talking, I was thinking about an exercise that I did. So I went to this conference in Dallas. almost 2 weeks ago. And one of the happy moments, because we were all locked in a hotel. So one of the happy moments was when we went outside and we did what we know as BioBlitz. So you go outside and you try to identify as many species as possible. And so the experiment was, so let's try and go outside and identify and look around and identify as many species as possible. And let's see if we can identify using this app. So there was this app, I think it's like iNaturalist. And it was very interesting to see that people went in with the best intentions, trying to stick to the app. And then every single one after the other, we kind of put the app aside and we're like, okay, that's it. Like, we don't want to use the app because it's so much better to look at nature. Because if you're looking at the app, you're basically looking at your phone and you're just relying on the categories wrong sometimes, because this is powered by AI. So like, we all know that AI is like less than perfect. So we were trying to just make sense of things without the app. And then we started taking notes and we started doing drawings that were less than perfect as well, but for some reason they were more fascinating. And so like, I'm wondering if like all of these like kind of like our I wouldn't call it obsession, but our desire to classify and to categorize everything might not be just artificial. That in reality, naturally, we are brought to chaos, but for some reason we find it very, and I'm using this we, which is kind of wrong, but I'm gonna use it. Like, we find this like very, like, it's very compelling and very comforting to find order, because you find it very predictable, but at the same time, it makes us uncomfortable because we know very well that things are not classifiable. So I'm wondering if you like I am sure that you've given some thought about this during your career working on these topics. And I'm wondering if you've thought about this, if you thought about like the fact that like within like human life, we have inherent this contradiction. So it's not either or, but it's like both. And like, we are constantly fighting it, and we are constantly like grappling with this.
Yeah, I have thought about it. I mean, from the perspective of the Umwelt that we were saying, which is this innate categorization system that we have in our brain. That categorization system is to survive. You know, it gives us tools to survive. And I think, this is my opinion, I think this is one of the tools that humans have, that have allowed humans to come this late in evolution, you know, to still be alive nowadays. And I think there is a constant contradiction in us, because we are complex systems, because we only exist in closeness to chaos. So if noise wouldn't exist and chaos wouldn't exist and disorganization, then life wouldn't exist, you know. And entropy is one of the best ways to exemplify this. So I think we are also drawn to this kind of like breaks into, yeah. I think it's a really beautiful thought. Also, this exercise that you did of going out and trying to find as many species as you can. We did something similar, but a little bit like contrary at the summer school in Cultivamos Cultura because Marta invited me to give a workshop. And the workshop was about trying to chaoticize taxonomies. So let's go out and find a body, whatever you find. The only rule is that you cannot kill something. You cannot kill a butterfly or a fish and bring it to me, because I have had a lot of experiences of people killing fish. So I don't tell me. Yeah, it's not something that I know. I thought, so this is a contradiction, for example. I talk a lot about like, there is no difference if we go deep enough into matter between them, but I don't want to see a dead fish, you know, I don't want you to kill, no. And then let's try to find these different bodies and let's try to find connections between them that are not the usual connections. That's also why I like this blood and non-blood one, because that's so far in the past that it's not, it's funny today, you know, but it's actually kind of interesting to think about like what kind of bodies are like vessels full of red liquid and which ones are alive but don't have this red liquid inside. That's an interesting thought of categorization and like playfulness between them. So we were just trying to feel like, okay, this looks like this, or this reminds me of my grandmother, and this reminds me of my grandmother, so I'm gonna put them together. And it was kind of a similar experience. And talking about apps, the only app that I pay and is very expensive is one that tells me what chemical elements are inside of rocks. I take the picture of the, I love it. I think that's simple, yeah. But I understand your decision of leaving it aside. Yeah.
I love apps. I love apps. Sometimes I don't know things, but sometimes I find that they are very wrong, or they are kind of, I don't know, too constraining. But I like to name things, like all my plants. I like, you walked into my office and there's all these plants. I actually found, I went all the way to find the name of the species, and then I have the name of the species, like I have a little a sign with the name of the species, and then underneath I gave them a name.
Yeah.
Which is my own.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also what a lot of people did back then when they were starting the categorizations. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of species have names of people.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of them,
Yeah.
like most of them have names of people.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
convention to do this.
No.
And
yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's a big difference. Like when you name your things, when you give names to your pets or your rocks or your plants, you're not hierarchizing them. You're just like loving them and giving them an agency in your life, like a space in your life.
I'm thinking about how certain exoplanets have names of beers.
I had no idea that. I never knew about this.
Do the scientists love Trappist? Anyway, yeah. Who was first? I saw. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sorry, this lovely dialogue made me think of one more thing. I wondered if there was an element of sort of difficulty of specifying individuals from the continuum, if that was interesting to you, in the sense that more than half or approximately half of the cells make up what we think of as being our human bodies or other species, and that the air is full of other species that are kind of coming into our body and then actually passing through, and that sort of that continuum of life. Is that something that inspires you as well?
It inspires me a lot. Like in physics, there are these like big questions, no? And one of them is about consciousness, because it is like I am this thing put together of atoms and then molecules and then cells and then bacteria and then DNA, but the DNA of the bacteria in my gut is actually the same as my cat, and not, like all of these little things that then bring together this body who thinks I'm not a woman, I'm a salt formation, So it's like, I think about that a lot, and this idea is very, very beautiful. So even though I think that the matter in this world is constantly shape-shifting, and I am not the same that I'm gonna wake up being tomorrow and whatever, the individual consciousness is still there. And it is a responsibility also that we have, because when I think it would be dangerous to go into the categorization of we are all just matter that's flowing and part of the whatever, because we arise here locally, and it gives us a responsibility, because I'm born in this like form that is able to speak, and not in the form that is not able to speak, like an insect, or what. So what is the breaking point between that being a hierarchy, which is what I'm trying to erase, and I like the word responsibility because of this ability to respond. We have the ability to respond to something. Yeah. So yeah, I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I think about that last one a lot. It's like I'm really interested in flattening the multi-species dialogue, but that doesn't eliminate the responsibility we have to care, because we've taken on the actions of non-care for hundreds of years that have caused this crisis point.
Yeah.
So we can't now then be like, oh yeah, but we're no different than the worms, right? Well, we made us the situation. We have to find a way to equalize and remediate and care for the situation. That's true.
Yeah.
Also, there's something I was reading this morning that might be interesting to you, of that those species in the gut are actually very fluid in communities, and so we can actually share health in being near others. So about 12% of your bacterial health is the same as the people that you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
And so health actually, or lack of health, can travel in communities, and it's a new dimension we have to start to consider.
Yeah. And also emotional health.
That too, that's contagious.
That's really interesting.
Descendants of people like Holocaust victims and winter travel have actually inherited a genetic change within their chemistry, which means that they are more sensitized to trauma. It's not just being a socialized situation, you understand how it can but at home.
Yeah.
Genetics really part of that conversation.
Yeah. Yes, because information is stored in every, like it is. That's why I called it a trajectory of information, which is a discussion I had then with Paul Vanus, because he was asking me like, why do you use the word information? But for me, the word information, first I take it from Sarah Walker, but more than that, artistically, it is that which creates the form from within. It's like it informs. It is yes, it is the formation from within the matter, and and information. The beautiful thing about the complexity of the living body that we are is that it is capable of replicating the information. So in this replication of the information, in this copying from one string to the other string, you are copying information. And I don't know why we think that traumatic experiences are not part of that information. If we see it in mice, for example, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well. I don't like to see myself in that way, but the part of the conversation that you know, from I coming from my scientific hat, it does not seem intuitively necessary that, let's say, for example, let's just use this concept of trauma, would be passed, the information would be passed in a chronic, you know, in a deep time sense, because it can be a very transient experience. And your chemistry adapts to that and changes to that. But to then become part of a permanent structure, that's a whole another level
Yeah.
of time interaction
Yeah.
and response.
Completely. And maybe I think there's a possibility that that's part of evolution of the species and of life and of different things. Like things evolve because they need to survive. And yeah, I just thought about this thing that I read recently with how do you call in English the cocoon of the butterfly. So before the cocoon,
Or the chrysalis.
the chrysalis. And what is the worm called in English? The caterpillar. Thank you. So the caterpillar has a specific form, and then it goes into the chrysalis and it becomes completely liquid, completely. There's not one single physical like hardness to it. And then it becomes the butterfly. And in that liquidity, it still keeps the traumatic information from the caterpillar, which is really interesting because it's like it changes completely the form and the materiality of the body, but it's still there. The information is still there. And this is also very, very, and I think it is multi-generational, not only in one. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think we are almost at time. So I think we should give her a round of applause because she's been on the spot for a long time. So thank you so much. And yeah, we can keep talking later. I mean, we need to go for dinner now, but yeah. Thank you so much for coming. It was very inspiring. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.